Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I'm going to be talking about ghosting on the new 16-inch MacBook Pro. And no, that's not because the device is haunted, this is to do with image persistence. And it's interesting because ghosting has been brought up a lot recently, I think, on the forums and on Reddit. And to me, this is crazy because it's actually been a thing with MacBook Pros for a long time now. You can go back to the 2016 Touch Bar MacBook Pro, compare it to a 2015 Retina MacBook Pro, so the previous standard, and you will notice that the screen on the newer device is far blurrier. Not in terms of resolution, of course, but in terms of motion. And it's been like that for, well, every iteration that I've seen, everyone I've owned, everyone I've checked in store up until this point. So seeing it on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, for me, it was a little bit of a disappointment because with every release, I hope they do address it, but they just haven't done it yet. And now people are talking about it and noticing it. I think there are two reasons for that. Number one, the screen's bigger, and I think it is just a little bit more obvious if the screen is larger because you've got more elements being impacted by the motion blur effect generated by the ghosting. But also because Apple have fixed so many of the other problems that we had with these devices, I think the keyboard being the main one, that now we're focusing on the other things that we maybe weren't paying much attention to before because there was so much focus on the butterfly keyboard. So the way to look at this, I think, is number one, is it an issue? Is it something that should put me off buying this device? And I say a resounding no, actually. I don't think it's a reason you shouldn't get the device. I think although there is a noticeable motion blur, it doesn't significantly hamper the experience of the device, and it's in line with recent Apple products anyway. So if you're coming from, well, yeah, like I say, a 2016 MacBook Pro or higher, you won't notice a difference because it's exactly the same as far as I can tell. But having said that, it is something that I would like Apple to focus on because now I'm getting to the point with these MacBook Pros that I'm running out of things to criticize about them, which is fantastic, right? I want a good device. I do own these, I do use them. But this is something that stands out to me as something they could stand to improve because the screen overall is very good. The resolution's very high, resulting in a high pixel density. You've got fantastic color accuracy and color reproduction. In fact, that is my favorite aspect of the screen, and I really struggle to move between other laptops as a result because it's just so good here. But one thing that is noticeable is the motion blur as a result of the image persistence on this screen. One thing definitely worth considering though is what are you actually planning to do with this device? If, for example, you're going to be editing photos, well, most of the time the image is static. You might update it, but you're not really moving it around. And because you don't have too much motion when you're editing a photo, it means that you're not going to see the motion blur, it's not going to get in the way, you might not even see it. And you're going to really benefit from the color accurate screen. So if you're a photo editor, I really would consider it no issue whatsoever. If, however, we go to the other side of the spectrum and you're a gamer, it can be a problem. And this is whether you're using macOS or if you've boot camped into Windows, because fundamentally, guys, it is the same screen. So a lot of gamers are familiar with the concept of motion blur because a lot of engines have it built in. So the idea is that it makes a smoother experience, but definitely one that looks blurrier as a result of, well, the motion blur. You have some people who quite like it, but a lot of people absolutely hate it. I'm sort of in the middle, like I can tolerate playing World of Warcraft, for example, with this motion blur, but I know people who just cannot for the life of them stand it. And can you imagine you have to always have motion blur on effectively with this because the screen's response time effectively results in what would be an enforced motion blur. Like, is that something that you can put up with? That's the question to ask yourself. So it's not necessarily something that every gamer should think is a problem, but if you think motion blur in gaming is a problem, then yes, it is an issue. There's just no getting away, and I wouldn't get the device, quite frankly. If you're a gamer who hates motion blur, do not buy this MacBook Pro or any of the recent ones. It's just not a good idea. If you're someone who watches a lot of video, you will probably be completely fine because the way that cameras naturally shoot in between frames, they actually have their own motion blur, right? So that's why we can tolerate 24 frames per second when we're watching films, because between each frame, there is a natural shutter speed blur that occurs. So because that's there anyway, you sort of don't notice the fact that the screen itself has some motion blur because your eye just perceives it as being the natural display that you would see from a regular film or a regular video. And even on 60 FPS videos on YouTube, I don't really see any problem. So yeah, if you watch a lot of YouTube, I wouldn't really worry about it, and I would just be happy that the colors are so nice and vibrant on the screen, and also that it's so big. So I suppose, look, to conclude this video, unless you are a gamer who hates motion blur, I would not let this put you off. As always, people, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.